My guest today is an expert in ayahuasca, researcher, healer, founder of the Ayahuasca Foundation in Peru, serving others with love, healing, and compassion. Welcome, Mr. Carlos Tanner. So, Carlos, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to have you, my first guest.
It's an honor.
Oh, thank you. Well, you've done this. I'm sure you've done this so many times. You've told your story, but I've heard it. But if you could tell the listeners about yourself, I would really appreciate it.
Sure. My name is Carlos Tanner, and I turn 46 tomorrow, although I'm not sure when this would be published. So it's probably, I already turned 46. And
happy birthday.
Thanks. In 2003, I was struggling with a lot of problems in my life. I suffered from depression, and I was a heroin addict, and I had some serious digestive issues that my doctor couldn't diagnose or tell me what was wrong. I was kind of falling apart, basically. And my life was spiraling downward, even though I had a successful career and lived in a nice house and drove a nice car. On paper, I had things going great for me, and the reality of my life was actually going down. And that culminated in me waking up in my car underwater, having blacked out behind the wheel, because I was drinking and taking drugs, and drove off into a river and almost died. At that point, I realized that I needed to do something drastic, and I needed to do it soon. And the universe kind of responded by allowing me to receive an email from a friend who was in Iquitos, Peru, in the Amazon rainforest. She had met two guys that knew curandero or a shaman, and she was going to drink ayahuasca. They were going to take her, and she thought that maybe I wanted to do it. She had no idea of what had happened to me. I saw that as a sign, so I booked a flight, and in June of 2003, I flew down to Iquitos, Peru, and met Don Juan, who was the shaman that I drank ayahuasca with 5 times during my stay in Iquitos. And during those 5 ceremonies and my stay there, I was healed in a way that I never possibly could have imagined. I realized the traumas and the roots of my afflictions that had led me to be depressed and led to addiction, and also realized the parasite that I had that was causing my digestive issue, and was able to fix it all myself through consciousness or spirit work. And it was all so absolutely fascinating to me. And my experiences were just so profound and eye-opening, and beyond eye-opening. I mean, they were just mind-smashing. Mm-hmm. And during that time, the shaman, or as we call them, curandero, told me it was my path to be a healer, and he invited me to live with him as his student. And I accepted that offer. And in January of 2004, I moved to Iquitos, Peru, into his house, and I began living with him and his family of 20 people, and we all lived in that house together. Mm-hmm. And he had his ceremonies right there in the family room of that house. And I began an apprenticeship with him that lasted 4 years. At the end of those 4 years, I came up with the idea for the Ayahuasca Foundation, which would be a way for people to have an easier time achieving what I had achieved, essentially finding a curandero, finding a healer that could help them and provide the right tools and guidance and environment for them to achieve their own healing, and also to learn the way that I had been. And so we began offering courses, educational courses that I call initiation courses, and also healing retreats. And then in 2013, I got another kind of random email, which was an offer to build if I built an ayahuasca research center, this charity from the U.S. would pay for it. And I accepted that offer as well and built the Riospo Ayahuasca Research and Retreat Center and completed that in 2017. And then in 2019, just last year, we hosted the first ever government-funded ayahuasca research, which included the first ever epigenetic study on any psychedelic. The results have been now come back, and they're just jaw-dropping. And so 4 journals have accepted those studies to be published, and we're just waiting to see the finished published products of those studies. So yeah, for the last 10 or 12 years, really, I've been the director of the Ayahuasca Foundation and organizing and designing healing programs, working with the Shipibo curanderos, healers from the Shipibo tribe, one particular family. And we've had over 1,000 people do our retreats and over 400 do our courses. And it's, it's just mind-boggling to think how it all played itself out, and what a blessing it's been to just get to live it all.
That is some story. Wow. You condense it down into, it all happened so naturally, but I imagine it was a roller coaster ride.
It seems like a roller coaster ride when I look back, but at the time, everything just made perfect sense.
Okay.
Like when I look back, and just the idea that I left my whole life behind to go and live in the Amazon rainforest in a house with no running water, I didn't even speak the language. That all seems crazy, but it didn't at the time. At the time, it would have been impossible for me to turn my back on that, because I was so sure that it was my destiny and the path that I was meant to follow. And I still feel that way, but yet it still feels like a crazy decision to make,
No. Well, that's wonderful when people like you who have been cured, you could have chosen to, go back to your ordinary life, take the cure, but instead you decide to heal others and help others. And I think that's fantastic. I mean, that's such a wonderful, if everyone did that, the world would, imagine what the world would be.
I can totally imagine that. I honestly, that's the way I think that it will be.
Well, fingers crossed.
Yeah, right.
So quite new to ayahuasca. I mean, I've come from an Ayurvedic background, so I'm very interested in the other end of the planet, India, and very plant-based medicine. But my friend is, he was very into ayahuasca, and he's just got back from Peru, and he raves about it, and he says it's the most incredible thing. So maybe you could explain a bit about how it actually works. You drink this plant extract, it blows the doors off. How does it actually work? How are you healed by this plant?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me just say that everywhere in the world, the entire human race relied on plant medicine for countless generations, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of years. Plant medicine was used exclusively by every human being around the planet. So whoever you are, whatever your ancestry is, wherever you're from, your ancestors used plant medicine. And most of them, if not all of them, use some sort of psychoactive substance. In India, it would be soma, which is believed to perhaps been from a psilocybin cubensis mushroom or something of that nature. But there was always some sort of psychedelic or psychoactive plant involved. And why is that? Well, I think there's a real scientific evolutionary reason for it. And it's something that probably crosses beyond just our species into other species of animals as well. But it's well known that we have limitations in the amount of reality we can perceive. Okay. A perfect example of that is in school, everyone learned about the visible spectrum. Mm-hmm. It's Roy G. Biv was how I remembered it: red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, violet, blue. Those are the 7 colors that you see in the rainbow. That's all we can see. We cannot see the frequencies of light lower than red, and we can't see the frequencies of light higher than violet. Sorry, I messed them up. It's blue, indigo, violet. But so violet and red and everything in between, that's what we can see. which is less than 1% of the spectrum of light that exists. So we can only perceive that tiny piece of reality. Same with our ears. You know, a dog whistle works. If you blow it, you can't hear it. The dog hears it. Why? Because the dog has a different spectrum of audio perceptive ability than we do. Mm-hmm. So we have biological limitations on what we can be aware of, what we can perceive in our environment and also in ourself, because our senses don't just perceive with organs, but there are other more subtle senses that are about feeling, intuition, gut feelings, things like of that nature. And all of those have limitations. But what ayahuasca does and what other psychedelics do, or psychotropic plants, they amplify the sensory perceptive ability. So when you take ayahuasca, it's not so much that you blow the doors off. What you're really doing is just expanding the spectrum of sensory perceptive ability. So now you can actually perceive more of reality than you normally could due to the biological limitations. So that has a great evolutionary gift, like if you can be more aware of what's going on, if your hearing can be improved, if your vision can be improved, if all of your senses can be improved, then you have a much higher survival rate. Simple as that. And we know that you achieve this naturally without taking a substance in times where you're threatened. Like if a wild animal is nearby, and you're in the woods by yourself or with someone or something, then your ears are going to prick up. Just biologically, you'll be like, I need to hear more, and because of the fear of being threatened with your survival, you will amplify your senses and you'll enter into a hypersensitivity state if your survival is threatened. So if you could achieve that without having to feel threatened by your survival, then you could actually use that as a tool to gain knowledge. You could gain much more insights about what is reality, what is this world. I want to learn about this world. I don't just want to survive now. I want to learn. And so once these plants, in my opinion, were discovered to do that, they were like, hey, let's keep using these, and so rituals and methodologies and ideologies were developed around the use of them that eventually developed into what we now call healing traditions or just traditions. And basically that's the precursor to what eventually became religions. However, the religions ended up removing the experiential aspect of it, which would be the taking of the substance, and were left with the dogma, which I think is unsatisfying for many people. So what happens when you take ayahuasca? Your sensory perceptive ability expands, but you always take it within the tradition. And that means that you take it in a ceremony. Mm-hmm. And the ceremony is this intricate science of consciousness enhancement techniques that help you to optimize the abilities that you have through the taking of the medicine. So you want to be in the dark, for instance, because if you're going to amplify your senses and you went out into the regular world, it could be really complicated for your brain to process. If you start seeing all this stuff that you're not used to seeing, you could get hurt easily. So you don't want to leave the space that you're in, and you create a darkness space, because what you're really interested in is the things that you can't normally see. So by creating a darkness space, you kind of create the background upon which the things that you hope to see, which are normally invisible, can be more easily realized or perceived. And then there's these inner elements of the ceremony, which to me are really fascinating, and especially with regard to intention. Intention is at the heart of the process. And so the medicine works in a very different way, because ultimately the medicine is just expanding what you can do, but it doesn't do it. You do it. And so it's just like, if it allows you to do more, well, that's great, but you could just sit there and not do anything. It's not like how we perceive Western medicine, where Western medicine is actually kind of the opposite. It doesn't really help you to do anything. It does it for you. And so you don't actually do anything. You just take the pill, and then it magically does some chemical interaction or with your biology, and then you're fixed or whatever. You're not never fixed. The symptom goes away a little bit for a period of time, and then you have to buy it again. But it's quite different than that. This is something that is just helping you to achieve your goals of healing. And the way to achieve your goals through healing is by typically entering into that hypersensitivity state, realizing the roots of your afflictions, and then with those insights, creating a plan to make changes in how you perceive yourself, the world around you, the dynamics of your relationship, and how you live your life. And through those changes is how the healing takes place.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I know from my metaphysics study that we live in a multi-dimensional existence, and that there are these other realms on the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't see. And when we reincarnate into those, the astral realms, and we come back to this realm and back to that one. And so when you're taking ayahuasca, does it activate your psychic senses so that you can tune into these other realms?
Definitely. I believe that the first name given to the active ingredient of the ayahuasca vine was, I want to say, what was it? Telepathium or something like that. And so it was a recognition of the fact that there was this telepathic effect, which again is just an amplification of the senses. We all have those abilities, except that we live in a culture now that very few of us, or very little attention is given to those senses. In fact, we don't even have names for those senses, but they certainly exist. And some people do either discover they have a good ability with those senses, or they intentionally develop those senses. And then so like that's certainly one of them. One of the effects, like, that you could call psychic, or I would just call it really like an increase of awareness, because I don't want to get into the idea of whether psychic ability happens or not. Like, I do believe that it does, and I think scientific studies have borne that out, that it does. But there's this common belief that it's like new age crap or something. And whatever you believe, that the fact of the matter is that you definitely increase your ability to be aware of yourself and the world around you.
Does the shaman, when he has to hold the space, I understand, because if you're quite vulnerable, surely, if if you're in this state, could somebody possess you and come in for a joyride? Is there, if your defenses are down at this point, how does the shaman, he sings this song, am I right? Or he sings away the bad spirits and contains the space?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would go so far as to interpret something as possession, although it is something that some people, like a term that people have used. But basically what the curandero does is first become a curandero. Mm-hmm. And in order to become a curandero, a person does what are called dietas. And dietas are relationship building exercises that you use to build relationships with spirits. They could be ancestors, but typically they're the spirits of plants in the realm of plant medicine, especially with ayahuasca. And so you could call them allies. And so the process of doing a dieta is that you would take an extract from a particular plant that you hope to build a relationship with. During that time, you would fast. And then for an extended time after the fast and the ingestion, which might only be a few days, you then follow a very, very limited diet, like a high sacrifice lifestyle, you could call it, mm-hmm. where you don't have sex, where you typically don't have much interaction with others, and where you don't eat any stimulating foods. So you don't eat anything sweet or salty or rich or anything of that nature. You're just kind of eating the blandest, low sensitivity food as a way to create a higher sensitivity in yourself, and thus, increase your ability to perceive the spirit that you're hoping to connect with. And then working with ayahuasca helps to create a much more cohesive connection to that spirit, to the point where you are essentially friends with that spirit. You prove yourself through the dieta that you're willing to make these sacrifices, and the plant spirit returns that favor by working with you and showing you insights and guiding you. And so a curandero typically has done numerous dietas with several plants, or maybe just one plant, but has dieted it so well that it's got an incredible relationship with it. And so in the ceremony, the curandero will then call these plant spirits into the ceremony to be with them, and then use their guidance and insights to help them with discovering what the issues are, or how to treat different afflictions of the patients that are attending the ceremonies. So it's really a communication. The Icaros, the songs that are sung, are really a communication, almost like sometimes like channeling, where the plant spirits are kind of singing through the person, and other times the curandero is singing to the plants to communicate directly, like telling the plants what they would like the plants to help them with. It's very, very fascinating for sure. But there are certainly elements of protection where you want to keep the ceremony space protected. But it's not, I wouldn't say, I mean, yes, it is a time when people's guards are down, or more like you're opened up. Mm-hmm. Because of that hypersensitivity state, you're obviously very sensitive. And if something happened, it could have some sort of negative reaction. So there is an element of like holding the space or keeping it safe. But I personally wouldn't go so far as to say like, oh yeah, some like spirit could come and possess you. But it is something that other people talk about. Maybe I don't want to go that far, because I think you might create a fear that would be detrimental. But it's also based on my experience of just seeing hundreds and hundreds of ceremonies and not having that be something that I would describe.
And you've done this yourself, this process where you fast and you eat one type of plant? And
yes, definitely. The dietas are probably one of the most complicated aspects of the tradition for Westerners to understand. However, earlier I said that shamanism was probably the precursor to religion. Mm-hmm. And but unfortunately the experiential aspect was removed and religion remained as dogma. Mm-hmm. I would say that, I'm going to guess, but that plant dietas or some sort of similar act was still left over in the religions without the understanding of it. So we have, Lent or Ramadan, or, like every religion has this period of time where they essentially do a dieta. But I don't think people understand it that well. But there is still kind of a lingering element that you're demonstrating your faith, and yes, I have done them, and they are absolutely fascinating. I mean, they are beyond. It's hard to describe, because you really do make friends with a spirit of a plant, and that spirit of a plant comes to you in many different forms, and then through the dieta it just stays with you like forever, as long as just like a friend. I'm sure you have friends where you might not even see them for a couple years, but your friendship is so tight that if you were to call them today, they would just be like, hey, how you doing, man? And like you would just be like, you could ask a favor of them right then and they would do it.
That's amazing.
And that's essentially what a curandero is, or what a shaman is it's someone that has friends in high places, you could say.
So it's about incredible respect for the plant world and nature.
Without a doubt, for sure. I mean, indigenous culture was so dependent on the environment, and we still are, but we've kind of lost the connection, because we go to a supermarket. Yeah. But when you relied on your survival and sustenance directly from the plants and directly from nature, then clearly there was inherent in that a massive respect. You know, if you killed an animal so that you could eat, you had tremendous respect for that animal and tremendous respect for nature as a whole. And that to me is really kind of the sickness of modern culture, is that we have forgotten that our environment is still sustaining us. Like we are nothing without nature, and that we are a part of nature, and that nature is happy to take care of take care of us, but that it is also conscious the same way that we are. And through our respect for nature, I think that's really the key to returning to health and harmony as a human race.
How can we cultivate this? Because sitting here talking now about spiritual, you know, the English language is not sufficient to articulate, you know, these experiences. But how can we, without going to the Amazon and taking ayahuasca, how can we cultivate this spirituality in our daily lives?
Well, I don't think it's that complicated. I mean, I think that as long as you have gone outside,
get out.
It's pretty, you know, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, go into the forest, any forest, even a park, whatever is near you, and really check out what's going on there. You know, or grow a few herbs on your windowsill, or grow a garden if you have the space for it, or, you know, just so that you can see. Like, I have a garden and we just picked our first cucumber, and I don't know. I mean, obviously I am who I am, but it's hard for me to imagine that anyone could just grow their own cucumber and pick it and then be like, whatever. You know, like there's this kind of amazing joy, like a fascination, like, oh my God, this thing, it grew. Like, how did it do it? You know, it's a magical process where you can take a seed and somehow a tree will come out of that seed, and all these fruits will be produced by this tiny little seed, you know, and that's just straight up magic. And that's the magic of nature. And then you can take that perspective everywhere, because it's everywhere. What are we, you know? We were this tiny little seed. Each one of us was this tiny little seed that fertilized this egg, and eventually we went through this crazy process and we came out who we are. Like that, you can't explain it. You know, you can describe it, you can name it, you can put like, oh, this is the embryo and it turns into the fetus or whatever, like, but you can't explain it. It's just magic. And when you can really like sink in the magic of nature, and that we are that magic of nature, then this kind of childhood innocent awe returns.
Right.
And once that innocence of our childhood returns, then nothing is so complex anymore, you know? It's like, you love your neighbor and you share what you have and you get along with each other, you know, all the things that we teach our children, which are the truth, you know, but unfortunately we don't listen to them as much anymore because life is too complex for us, or at least we've decided it is. But nature is incredibly complex, far more complex than anything we could possibly imagine. And yet it's also just so simple.
Yeah, we've put these layers of complexity on ourselves, these veils, and we've lost sight of that simplicity. I wish I could go back to that childhood innocence. Is that what taking, you know, ayahuasca, when you're in nature and you surrender everything, you're going back to that? Is that?
Without a doubt. Well, especially because of that amplification. So like, you know, maybe I'm not sure how old you are. I'm going to be 46 tomorrow. So I'm 46 years old. I've come to this idea that I pretty much know like what's going on, you know? And then one night, all this new stuff like appears for the first time, you know, in decades. You've thought you had a handle on what reality was, and now all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, you know, like this stuff is here. And so it's almost like you can't help it. You can't help but return to that awe, because we are children. No matter how old you are, as long as you have a mother, you're a child. You know, and even if your mother passes, you don't just stop being a child anymore. Like, we're always going to be children. And that awe is always going to be an advantage to us, because living in awe of nature is living in awe of ourselves. And in awe is love. You know, when you're in awe of the sky at night, you love it. You know, the energy of awe is the energy of love. And so if you're in awe of your own existence, then you're in love. You love yourself. And if you love yourself, all of your cells are going to act the best they can. You know, all your whole cellular physiology is going to be like, let's do the best we can, because that's what you do when you're in love. And that is also the effect of losing that awe is part of why we don't love ourselves, you know, and that plays into the complexity. There's always like a but we want to throw in there, like, oh, I'm a good person, but, you know, or something like that. And animals don't do that. Nature doesn't do. A tree would never say that. You know, I guarantee you, a tree would never think anything other than part of nature. Nature is God. I am God. I love myself. And if we can get there, then we're going to put ourselves on the right path to living healthy lives and being in harmony with each other. I've just totally oversimplified it. The reality is that we all made a bunch of mistakes, and some of those mistakes were not our fault. But regardless of whether they were our fault or not, they're our responsibility. And we all have the responsibility to take care of ourselves and to address the afflictions that we have. And, you know, and trauma, which is essentially inaccuracies in our interpretation of reality created in a hypersensitivity state induced by terror or fear, is at the cause of so many of our afflictions. And it's a real challenge to get to the depth of what we might call the subconscious, where these traumas reside, because we don't have the ability to achieve that hypersensitivity state unless we're in a state of fear. And so psychedelic therapy and ayahuasca is this great tool for us. But to me, nature also can produce those hypersensitivity states if you were to spend enough time in nature, because you wouldn't have the same stimulation and the over distractions and everything. And if you just spent time in nature and return to that energy of nature, then with that, I think a hypersensitivity state would be achieved. So to me, like, ayahuasca is the shortcut for sure. And I'm all for it. I'm not saying shortcut like a bad thing. Like, I use shortcuts all the time. We should be using shortcuts. But nature is really nature heals everything. Nature knows everything.
So do you still need ayahuasca? Can you meditate in nature and achieve the states that I can only dream about?
Well, yes and no. Like, I don't drink ayahuasca very often anymore. But when I do, I have stuff, you know, I'm not enlightened. My life didn't get perfect. You know, things still come up, and that's just what happens. You know, life keeps going. And so you're always kind of maintaining, you know, just like, you clean your car and you're like, oh my, look at me, I'm driving my nice car. A month later, you're like, oh crap, what happened? You got to clean this thing again, you know? That's just what happens. I think that if you look at nature and the animal world, they tend to do a much better job of constant maintenance, you know, and maybe that's a lesson that we could all learn from them, where we tend to like find a time every so often to devote to maintenance. And it seems more like in the animal world, it's a daily ritual. And some people, I'm sure, probably have a daily ritual. And Ayurveda probably instills a daily ritual of maintenance.
Sure. The Dinacharya, it's all about, keeping us on track with this. But I guess from what I'm hearing from you, you're living it, embodying it in every moment. And then rather than, I wake up, I'll do my pranayama for an hour, then I'll do my meditation, then I'll go and I'll make this special breakfast, and then you can just go more with the flow and not hold on tightly to these routines that the rest of us are trying to learn. And
Right. Well, I mean, we're all the way that we are.
mm,
For me, I'm so deep into consciousness. Like consciousness to me is the answer to everything, and it is
yeah,
the not just the response, but it is the question. Like consciousness is just the beginning and the end and everything in between for me. That's my core truth upon which I have built my entire belief structure of reality upon, and I chose to do that.
mm,
Because it resonated with me more than any other truth I could imagine. And so because of that though, and not accidentally, I like that consciousness can be my answer.
mm,
Like if I have an issue, then consciousness will be what I look to as a way to solve it, because I don't need a particular fruit in my blender. I don't need, a
but
particular
isn't there a supplement that really can help with it?
um, and that is my perception of the originators of those things. Like I'm certainly not against Ayurveda. In fact, we have an Ayurveda counselor as part of our retreat programs who offers a treatment, a lifestyle plan, doing an evaluation for every person based on their Ayurvedic, evaluation. I'm all for it.
Mm,
But at the same time, I guess personally, I view them all as steps to try to get someone to a point where you have, I want to say, empowered yourself, through your own liberation of consciousness. And so I'm all for like taking all those steps. And I still use those steps. It's not like I don't meditate or don't practice yoga. But I guess I rely more on my consciousness, like that. All of those, and every practice to me is kind of like a reminder. You do the rituals and you do the techniques and the methods and the practices as a reminder of what you're capable of, what you're made of, which is consciousness, in my view. And I feel the same way about the ayahuasca ceremony, to be honest.
yeah.
Like the ayahuasca ceremony is a reminder that our life is a ceremony. And so when we forget that our life is a sacred ceremony, then we need to go to a sacred ceremony, and remember.
Yeah, they're all crutches before we can walk.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's very, wonderful.
I apologize because I feel like I'm coming off like I'm some guru or something. I'm just a regular person. These are just my opinions, and I'm definitely not perfect in any way. I'm a dad, and I struggle with being a dad. I'm a husband. I have struggles with that as well. And, I've got brothers, and I'm a son, and I'm a person, and
Yeah,
every
I'm sure
one
you
of
can be a
us.
dick sometimes. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure.
But you've had 17 years in the Amazon, so I'm sure that doesn't. You come out a different person after that. You come out with so much to share, and this service aspect of what you're doing is such a, because that's what the trees do. They're serving, and the nature is serving. Everyone's in constant service. So I think that's also a big takeout, that we must all live in service.
Without a doubt. Well, I mean, we're all striving, I think we're all striving for the same goal, which is to be fulfilled or to be satisfied and beyond happy.
Mm.
Like happy, I don't think is actually the end goal. It's just that we recognize happiness when we're satisfied. And so that's like the symptom, like we see that, and I think we get caught up with that more so than the root. But the root is satisfaction or fulfillment, and that's what service provides. Like you're never as fulfilled as when you know that you're helping someone.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, if we all realize that a lot more, then we'd realize that all these health, happiness, success are byproducts of the process.
For real. But I mean, I have people that I trust, people that I look up to as guides and mentors and people of that nature, just as we all do. And that's the lessons that they teach as well. I have yet to encounter anyone that says service to others is not a good idea.
No, but they forget. Everyone forgets. We all forget,
That's true.
But so I really want to help you. You have a wonderful message, and I'd like to help you with a song to promote all of this. So how can I, how can I best serve you?
Interesting question. I appreciate that question. Well, writing a song is awesome. I don't know if I would recommend writing the song specifically about me or ayahuasca, but really just about some of the things that we talked about, maybe about how we all are children and that we all are nature. And I view it like I have 5 trillion cells in my body. So do you. And every one of those cells is a conscious individual. It has all these complex systems, respiratory, excretory, digestive, like it does all these things. You can take a cell out of your body, it'll keep living at least for a while. And they all have something to do. All my cells have got this, there's the team that makes serving, takes me. Yeah, they're all serving. And so are we. We're cells in the body of something much, much bigger, whether you call it the earth, but then the earth becomes a cell in the body of something much, much bigger. And, it's awesome literally awesome to think of. And so if we can just remember that, like we're all in this together, we're literally like part of one single body, so let's make this the healthiest body that we can. And every cell just has its one job, which is be healthy. It doesn't even have a specific job. It's just basically like stay healthy, because the messaging comes from this much higher source of our own consciousness, that our own consciousness pervades our physiology. And then likewise, like we're the one cell, so the consciousness of the earth pervades our consciousness, and then the universe pervades the earth's consciousness. And so I don't think it's so complicated. Just be you, and be proud to be you, and it'll all work out. And that's my biggest mantra, and that should be the song. It'll all work out, because I say that that would be an homage to me and all my staff, because I've said that about 10,000 times.
It'll all work out.
Yeah, it'll all work out. If you look at nature, like it all works out.
Yeah.
Like if some horrible earthquake happens and then you go back and you're like, well, it all worked out.
Yeah.
I apologize if anyone has lost a loved one in an earthquake or something, but that I meant on a global scale, obviously. Like a forest fire happens and then you go back and you're like, it all worked out. And nature keeps going.
We're all in a reincarnatory cycle. So were you religious before you started on this journey?
No, not at all. I was an atheist, actually.
So what's your perspective on God now? And
I just described it.
Yeah.
That is God to me. God is the universe and the consciousness that is manifested in the universe. And as long as you believe in consciousness, I think it's very weird that if people believe that consciousness is created by the brain,
it's not really believable, is it? Yeah.
It's very challenging for me to even try to believe that. It just doesn't make sense.
No.
And so what fits much better for me, and especially when you look at the macro and the micro versions, like if I go micro with myself, I'm going to find trillions of little things that make up me, and all of those things act as if they have consciousness. You could basically prove that they do have some level of consciousness in their ability to react to their environment, and then go macro with it, and say, well, I'm on a planet, and this planet is its own living being. It's a singular individual made of countless, infinite amount of little pieces, and all of those pieces are consciousness, or at least I feel confident in saying I am conscious. And
yeah, I'm pretty sure.
and and then you take that more macro and go into the solar system, which happens to look like our depiction of atomic structure. And it's, I don't
Isn't
know.
that logical? It's so
Right.
if something is true on the macro, it must be true on the micro, and vice versa.
It would be a very bizarre coincidence. it just happened to be that way.
It's like it's like the fleas on the dog saying, do you think the dog has feelings? No, I can't feel a thing. And they're having a TV show about we're discussing whether the dog is flat.
Yeah.
One guy, I saw a leg. Have you been to there? And you've seen? I mean, we're all discussing things which are way beyond our pay grade, and yeah. But it's logical that the tree in the forest, the tree has millions of life forms on it, and the forest has a consciousness as well, and everything is this collection of life forms. It's such a logical thing. You don't even have to be spiritual to get that.
I agree. I mean, I kind of avoid spiritual terminology for that reason, because I unfortunately see this like divide in spirit and science. Like you can't say those two words together. But I'm happy to like use consciousness. Consciousness is the perfect bridge to me. Like you can be so scientific that you're an atheist, and you can be so spiritual that you reject science. But neither one of you rejects consciousness. Consciousness is like the all-pervading agreement. And to me, it's like the perfect platform to describe reality.
Yeah, well, if you look at the idea of science, or how the universe was created, there's this big bang, just happened from nothing. Everything, trillions of universes were inside this tiny space, and suddenly all just happened. And that's the most wacky idea, most spiritual idea you could come up with.
Right. I know, like, and the idea that someone to me could say like, well, I don't believe in God. I just believe that there was nothing, and then an explosion happened and the universe came from it. But your ideas about God creating it, come on, silly. Like you're like, what? Like the whole explosion from nothingness makes sense, but like saying God created it. Yeah. But I think that we're too caught up, like I was too, like atheists. They're not really rejecting God. They're rejecting a ridiculous concept of God. That there's like some old man with a beard in robes sitting on a cloud throwing lightning bolts at masturbators. That's like a ridiculous I reject that concept completely. If that's what God is, then of course I'm an atheist, but that's not what God is. People wrote about it or something and wanted to give it some sort of personification, and if you can't see through that, then be an atheist, I guess.
Yeah. From our metaphysical studies, we learned that the God in the Bible is the sun. Everything, and we are all solidified sunlight, and we all came from the sun. Everything, we exist on this realm of the electromagnetic spectrum, and everything's solidified, but it's as transparent, and you put your hand through it if you really could. They have this, they call it scientism now. I've heard it called that people worship science as it's a god. That science is changing so much, and if they laugh at the science from 100 years ago and 50 years ago. So I just don't understand why they think this now is, oh, we've got it now. We were wrong before, but it's right. Okay now.
Well, it's a mess now, to be honest. Science, I really don't like the idea that you can even use the word. Like some people will say, I believe in science. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, well, did you see Monsanto paid for a bunch of research studies that proved that glyphosate is totally safe? So do you want to spray your kids with glyphosate because the research, the science says it's safe? The EPA in the US says it's safe, but they lost a court case about a week ago. They just paid $10 billion in a lawsuit that proved that it caused cancer. what's the science? You know, like, where is science? Did the science prove it caused cancer, or did the science prove that it's safe? Well, the court of law proved that it caused cancer, but our Environmental Protection Agency proved that it's safe. So you can't just say science. You know, that science is a method, and you can be really good at it. You can be really bad at it. You can use it for good things, and you can use it for bad things. You can manipulate it the way that you want, and you can do it with integrity and honesty. And, you know, it's not so simple to just say, I believe in science anymore. I think there was a
always
time
been that way.
No, I think there was a time where it was an earnest, attempt to discover, but there wasn't money attached to it. There wasn't someone saying, hey, can you do this research because I want to get this permit, or I want to get this approval or certification or regulation, or I want to sell my product, or I want to do this or that. Scientists didn't used to get paid. Science was just like a noble endeavor that people had for the quest for truth. And I think that's the problem, is that people still think that. You know, people still think, oh, scientists, they're all just in a quest for truth. But the reality, which Rupert Sheldrake wrote about in his book, Science Set Free, is that there's a lot of other motivations. And you might have a grant that's providing you with your mortgage payments and putting food on your table, and that grant is specific to a particular theory. And what if you know that that theory is inaccurate, but you're still paying your mortgage with it? Are you going to abandon it? Or are you going to? I mean, that's totally legitimate too, to say, hey, keep going with that science that even you know is wrong, because the money that you're getting from those grants is paying for your children's education. Like, I wouldn't even criticize it. But the reality is that we have to take all of this into consideration when we look at science now. We can't just say, in fact, in the US, it became super controversial because they were talking about hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for COVID-19. And a study came out, was published in The Lancet, which is supposed to be legitimate scientific journal, saying that it is harmful, that it shouldn't be used. And then all these scientists criticized that study. And then The Lancet realized, oh, actually, this study is totally fake, and they retracted it. But before, in the middle of that, all the news, talked about the study as if it was the truth, and this is the science. And now, it's just like,
it's a mess.
It's a mess. Yeah.
In America, you Americans, I mean, gosh.
We pioneered it. We perfected the manipulation of science and the brainwashing of people through headlines of science. That's what we reduced our science to. Like, what can I write in a headline?
Yeah, you get the medicine and the science you deserve, I guess, in terms of.
Of course, having said that, I have a research center, and we're doing scientific studies on ayahuasca.
Oh, so. Yeah, but if it turns out ayahuasca's proved to be harmful, would you
Well, of course. I'm not doing the research. I'm hosting the research. I'm providing all of the whatever the space to have it in, and the participants and everything.
No.
But of course, I would be shocked, after 10 years, of seeing all these amazing stories and witnessing all these healings, to then have scientists come in and say, actually, it's bad for you.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's scientists that would do that. But I mean, it's just what you said, going back to what you said before, just to close out, reminds me of how the religion evolved. 600, in 600 AD, you must have had all these people arguing about what should go in the Bible and what does God actually mean, and no, this phrasing means that, and what you did last year, I'm afraid you can't do anymore. And it's just human behavior is the root cause of it.
Yeah, I mean, you can get into some hardcore conspiracies when you bring that story up.
Yeah.
But I believe that there was pure religion, but
as pure science, as there was pure science.
Right, exactly. And then it they got a hold of it and used it as a tool to control people, I guess.
Yeah. And just coming back to full circle to what you said, if you just go back to the pure consciousness and you do everything out of love and service, then yeah, all your needs will be met, and the world would be the paradise we all dream of.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so thankful, to be honest, that this research is being done, because we do live in a scientific society now,
Sure,
like
sure.
in the sense that, if your religious leader told you to drink ayahuasca, it wouldn't carry the same weight on a society level as if a scientific journal published articles suggesting that we should drink ayahuasca. And we're seeing the effects of it. Johns Hopkins University last year announced they're going to build a psychedelic therapy research center, tens of millions of dollars devoted to it. Imperial College in the UK made a similar announcement, millions of dollars to devote to psychedelic therapy research. We've got an organization in the United States, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies, which is MAPS. They've been working hard to legalize or decriminalize psychotropic substances or psychedelic therapeutics. And there's a huge decriminalized nature movement sweeping the country and probably going to sweep the world, which has already produced fruit in the decriminalization of psilocybin cubensis mushrooms in Denver, Colorado, and the decriminalization of all entheogens in Santa Cruz, California, and Oakland, California. There's legislation that's coming up that will be voted on this year in certain states, like in Portland, Oregon, and Vermont and Colorado, to legalize mushrooms on a statewide level, which to me is only going to lend, the path forward is obvious, that we are working to legalize psychotropic substances as a whole so that people can explore their consciousness fully through the investigation of hypersensitivity states in their own interpretation of their experiences. And to me, that the sky's the limit there. So I'm really, really optimistic about it. And I think that the time for pharmaceuticals is coming to an end.
Well,
And
fingers crossed.
yeah, and people are going to start to empower themselves through their own consciousness, and they're going to return to nature, which they are made of, as the source of their sustenance, as it has been for the 100,000 years of our existence as humans.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, I'm just thankful we have people like yourself leading the way who are, have really done the groundwork, because also with Ayurveda, that's been commercialized, and, if you, what we have now is nothing like what you can get in India. So,
well, that's the big picture of it. But there's the massive effect, because that's going to happen with ayahuasca also, and it's going to happen. Yeah, it is. And it's hard to say, like, oh, well, it happened with yoga and meditation and Ayurveda and every other indigenous practice, but it won't happen with this. Like, that would be foolish. It's going to happen. But to me, the biggest picture is, even if you're in the most plastic culture of the world, commercialized or whatever, materialistic, does Ayurveda make your life better?
Sure.
Even
sure.
if it's like
Just
a crazy watered down version. Yeah. Does it make your life better?
Definitely.
And it's hard to say no. Like, it does. And yoga also. Like, even if you're more interested in how expensive your yoga pants are and your yoga mat being the right design or whatever, chances are doing yoga is going to make your life better.
100%.
And meditation and all of these practices, as much as they've been commercialized and watered down and, so different than if you were to go back to their source. And ayahuasca it's already happening. There's ayahuasca ceremonies probably in your town.
Yeah, we've had one around here.
Yeah, like they're everywhere. Are they the same as what there are in the Amazon? I would doubt it.
Yeah.
But is that what's important? Or what's important is that they're doing something to make an improvement in people's lives. And if that's the case, then can we really knock them? There's a million things you could do to make your lives worse.
Yeah.
If you're doing something to make your life better, whether or not it's as good as it was in India, or as good as it was in Tibet, or as good as it is in the Amazon rainforest, isn't as important as just the impact that it has on your life. And if that's a beneficial impact, then good.
Yeah, no, and then maybe more people go back to the source, and they find they do get the real deal. And yeah, oh, wonderful. Well, that's thanks for the work you're doing just to make the world a better place. It's if there were more people like you, I think the world will be this paradise for all. One day it will be.
I have a lot of confidence, to be honest. The world, here's a great analogy, and I think this is what helps me, I guess, when I look at the world, especially what's happening now. But if a small child were to walk in on a pregnant woman in labor and in the moments of giving birth,
mm-hmm.
and they just took in the scene without having any idea about what was going on, they would probably perceive it really bad. Like, this is really something
blood.
Yeah, something really bad is happening. Like you can recognize pain, you can recognize anguish, you can recognize suffering, you recognize blood. Like, you put these pieces together and it is bad what is going on.
Yeah.
But then later on, with maturity, you come to realize that actually that was the greatest moment of that woman's life. Wow. Forever. That was the greatest joy and the greatest moment of forever.
Yeah.
And the only difference was that we just didn't understand what was happening. And I look at what's happening now, and I try to keep that perspective that we don't understand what's happening. Mm. The earth is clearly doing something, and I would like to say that it's giving birth to a whole new life. A whole new something. A bundle of joy is being produced, but we are too focused on the suffering that's part of the process to understand the deeper meaning. We simply lack the maturity to understand that we're witnessing the birth of something that later on we will say is the greatest moment in the history of mankind. But right now we're just too caught up in the labor pains of it. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but it certainly makes it a lot easier to get up and smile and look out at the world and think that it's all going to work out. And
it'll work out.
It'll all work out. I guarantee it.
Oh, fantastic. I think we should end there because that's such a positive note. I don't think we can top that.
All right. Sounds good.
Oh, well, thanks so much for taking the time to speak to me, Carlos.
No worries. It was really a pleasure to be invited, and I hope that this podcast does some wonderful things and provides a lot of help for people that listen to it.
Thank you. Well, I'm very inspired, so I better get to work on a song.
All right. Nice. It'll all work out. You were embarking on this new project, but so how's it going?
It's going very well, thank you. Yes, you're the first guest, so the first song to be finished, so it's gone very well. I've been working very hard on it. It's taken a long time to make the songs, particularly with your song, because it was the first one. I don't know if it was that or we went a bit overboard. We made it quite epic.
Oh, well, that's my style, so that fits perfectly.
No, I took it to because I wrote the song, I made a demo, and then I took it to the guys, and they listen to it and see what they think, and they did a completely different style, and I went away and I thought, I thought mine was. I liked my original one. How we like our original creations.
Yeah, surprise.
So, because theirs was a lot more mellow. So we put it. What we did was we combined both. We made it to like a 3-part symphonetic song, and we put mine at the beginning and theirs at the end.
Oh, I see. Whoa.
Yeah.
All right. Whose are this is like a band you work with, or
yes.
When you say the guys? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm about to check this song out. I'm super excited. All right, here I go.
Imagine a scene where a very young child watches his mother give birth to his brother, seeing the blood hearing the screams. How traumatizing. It could haunt him for years. It's hard to metabolize all the things that we see and learn from the lessons we need to receive while we watch all the chaos going on the earth. Zoom out on these changes and witness a birth. The world, she is changing. We must change too. Raise our vibrations. Live up to this truth and be brave, 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 and it will work out. It'll all work out. All the fire, the Amazon, trials of your wayward son, the deaths of your loved ones, the suffering of everyone will work out. It will all work out. It will all work out. It will all work out. I know that sins can't be forgiven, but learn from the lessons we're given. We'll come through this somehow. Let's pray for the power now. There are always reasons, I know I have seen this. Help us through to rise like the phoenix. One day we'll get what it's all about. I've faith that it will work out. 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 It will work out.
Wow. Man, you did a great job.
Oh, thank you very much.
It was epic. I mean, maybe I'm biased, but you know, it didn't. That wasn't had anything to do with me. That was just you know, great music.
Thank you.
And, yeah, man. Thanks so much for doing that. Thanks for sharing it, but also just thanks for making that happen.
No worries. Well, thank you for the inspiration, you know, the positive message, the great metaphors, you know.
No worries, man. I'm glad that I could somehow contribute to that.
No, great. Well, I hope you can use it in somehow in your to promote your activities, and I'm sure your friends will get a kick out of it whenever you say it'll all work out.
Yeah, right. Well, you know what? You sent me the single cover, like the artwork, And now I've been texting, my team, trying to figure out what the heck we're doing to like reopen and get started again. And, of course there's a lot of issues. And so now I just like, it's like my meme at the end, like, hey, don't worry. And I paste that picture.
God. Now you can hit them with a song as well. So
yeah, totally.
Positivity.
Awesome, man. So awesome. So is that what I just listened to? Will that be public? Like, will I be able to share that?
Yeah, it's live. When this show goes live, it'll be live.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so great. And I can foresee like a really cool finish where, I mean, every song, I guess that's the way the music industry is now, where you don't even make an album or need to, but to have an album of your podcast songs, what an innovative concept. I'm not familiar with anyone that's ever done that. So kudos for the originality as well. I think that's a brilliant idea.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Well, you were the first. You kicked it off. So
I was just telling the idea, I was telling someone, I've got this really interesting call coming up because, I explained like what your project is, and they're an artist, and they immediately were like, oh, what if I did that with a painting? Like, what if I did interviews and then I painted the interview? And I'm like, yeah, man, it's the whole concept of just creating art through inspiration. And you kind of found a platform to develop the inspiration. And that's a brilliant idea.
I think it's even a better idea for a painter, because when you sit for a portrait, it's an hour, you go back for many sittings, you sit there for a long time while they're drawing you and you're chatting, so yeah, I think an artist should definitely do it.
But great, the production is awesome, man. Like I thought the change, when it like kind of cracked in, I thought that was smooth, but also like picked up when you said epic, like it got to that point where I was like almost, like wanting to lift my hand up because it crescendoed, it came up real to a nice high there.
Oh, well, thanks very much. Yeah, like I say, there's all the rest are going to be much more simple. I'm not going to do this again because this is crazy, man. We overdid it. We over-delivered for you, but for everyone else, just a short little song.
Oh, well, I will take that as a very special treat for me then.
Definitely. Thanks again, Carlos. Great chatting to you.
Definitely. Best of luck with this project. I look forward to hearing the podcast and also to hearing your future podcasts and future songs.
Thanks very much. Happy travels.
You too. Take care.
Bye. Thank you to Maurizio Sarnicola and Massimino Vozza for working with me on the music, and Dori Verbo, my researcher. And thank you to you for listening. Please rate and review the podcast if you enjoyed it. If you like the song and want to support us, then you can download it for $1 on our website at podsongs.com. It's also available on all the major music streaming services. Thanks again.